I've had a really fortunate career for the past 20 years or so. I still feel playfully young anyway, of working in television and film and now video games. And before working in video games, I was a visual effects supervisor in the film industry and worked on Twister and Minority Report and Mission Impossible 2, some really interesting films. And you know, often people ask me, Henry, you worked on these great films. Why are you doing video games now? I get asked that question all the time. And really, I think the most interesting, there's a lot of answers to that question, but the most interesting answer is what I want to talk to you about today. The visual effects industry has done an incredible job lately of bringing digital characters to film screens. Real living characters like Gollum in Lord of the Rings, or more recently Benjamin Buttons. These characters are playing leading roles in films. This is something we never thought was possible years ago, and it's really kind of a dream come true for us in the industry. And you know, I think that there's a possibility that if you can bring these characters to film in such a compelling way that they can act as a lead character, it's probably possible that we can do that in video games too. Not today, not tomorrow, maybe 5 or 10 years from now. So I could imagine a scenario whereby you're playing a game and you're interacting with a character. Let's say you're actually interacting with Brad Pitt, and he's so real and alive that it seems like you're interacting with a real person. And this, you would be in the film, for example. You know, if you did something that Brad Pitt didn't like, he'd get angry at you. If you helped him, he'd be nice to you. You'd really interact with a real living character. And for me, this is why I'm excited about working in games today. I see a huge potential here. This is really exciting and something that really has never been done before. In games right now, we use cinematics to tell the story. And I think for a lot of us, cinematics are really just bad, short movies. And they take you out of the experience. You're busy playing the game, and all of a sudden you're watching this movie. I can see a future where, and I hope this happens, where there are no cinematics in games at all. That you're playing the game, you're involved with the characters, and they're telling the story, you're interacting with them. The choices you make and the things you do, you develop your own story and your own fiction, and the game evolves in a way that it doesn't for anyone else, and you have a unique experience. This would be really exciting. In fact, I think we could really revolutionize interactive entertainment this way. So how do we do this? I think the first step is we need to make characters that are completely believable, that look completely photorealistic, and you're absolutely convinced that they're real. And these, I just love these characters. I don't know about you, but some of my favorite things are outtakes. So fortunately, these are characters that never made it into our games. These are characters whose animation poses were kind of broken, and they were all corrected, and we didn't ship them that way. Instead, these are the kind of characters we've been shipping in our games recently. And I think you can see here that we're doing much better at getting a really photorealistic look to the characters to get them looking really believable, at least as a screenshot and a still. And it's very difficult. Achieving the suspension of disbelief is hard because humans are so good at detecting the slightest flaw in a character. If the eyes are just off by a little bit, it looks odd to you because we're really good at seeing that in others. And I think the work that the artists have been doing lately and the technicians have really excelled in this area. But if you've ever played a video game, you know, you've probably experienced this situation where you're controlling the character and the character's walking and the character's going like this, and he runs into a wall and the character just keeps walking. And that's not that convincing of an experience. You don't really believe that that character is alive. I don't think we've, you know, the emotion of the character has to be as good as the way the character looks to really do a convincing performance. And that's where the real challenge is. In fact, one of my favorite examples is in one of our own games in Madden just a few years ago. There would be a receiver running down the field, and the ball is being passed from behind the receiver. He's running down the field. He reaches up, grabs the ball, and catches it like this. And it's like, did he have eyes in the back of his head underneath his helmet? How did that happen? You know, it's impossible. So it's critical to get them to move realistically. And to kind of see where we've come from, I want to show you a quick retrospective of our FIFA game. So looking back 15 years ago, you know, this was pretty amazing at the time. This was great technology. These things were really fun to play, but clearly not a realistic experience. And the characters were, you know, much more dimensional on the PlayStation, but still very robotic motion. You wouldn't believe they're really alive. And on PlayStation 2, you know, even further, you got lighting and shading, and the motion's better. We're using motion capture, so we're getting better animation clips. But still, you know, very robotic motion as they're running. It's very repetitive. So one of the most challenging areas in animation for us is foot planning. And you know, as humans, we think this is the simplest thing in the world. If you're going to turn, you just kind of move your feet and you turn. But in games, it's been so hard to do. And I'm going to show you an example here of the way it used to be and what we're capable of doing now. So on the left side, you'll see what used to happen in games. As the character turned, he'd just slide. And again, that completely takes you out of the experience. You don't believe that it's real. But you can see from a FIFA capture here, and this is all real-time stuff, that this character is moving around, planting his feet, interacting with his ball in a very complicated and sophisticated way, and he's not sliding at all. And it's really a huge achievement for the games industry to be able to do that. So I want to give you a little sneak behind the peek behind the curtains of how we actually do this. And I'll show you a little bit of technical stuff here to explain it. So this is a kind of a test bed, we call it. It's a piece of technology where we prototype animation. It's not about the shading and lighting and all that. It's just about getting the motion right. And I'll explain what's going on here. So this character is being controlled by a controller the entire time. So he's being moved around by a controller. And you can see he's moving left and right and planting his feet as we're switching him around. And you can turn the audio all the way down on these. And he's also leaning into runs. So as he starts to run, he leans into it. As he slows down, he kind of leans back. He's even doing a strafing move here where he's looking one direction and running the other. This is a good defensive move that is actually very difficult for us to do. In the past, whichever way you were looking is the way you would run. And now we can do this defensive move. The character can use this to kind of position himself on the field while he's watching an opponent, for example. So it's really important. But you know, we can also give some style to the motion. So maybe it's the beginning of the game. He's feeling pretty good. He's got his chest out and his head high. He knows he's going to win. Oh, it's the end of the game, and he's kind of tired. And they lost. And his head's down. And with just a simple little change like that, we can give him so much different attitude and personality in his motion. And we can also vary and this looks a little bit odd, but not all characters have the same body proportions. In the past, they'd all have to have the same skeleton and the body proportions because the animation would only work on one shaped body. Some characters have, some players and real athletes have longer legs. But even with longer legs, we're able to get them to do the foot planning and the accelerations and all that basic kind of biomechanics of making a believable motion. And we can even get them to change their stride length so they can take short little steps as they're approaching a ball to kick it. Or, you know, we can give them a really long stride length. You know, maybe they're running off the field at the end of the game. And this is all with the same animation clip, so we're not having to capture different motion and blend it together to make this possible. We're actually doing this in a way that allows for the animators to go in and craft the motion by setting some kind of characteristics about how the player moves rather than just blending the animation clips together. So this is incredibly powerful technology for us, and in the past we could never do that. So getting one character to move around realistically is pretty tough. And you know, getting them to look realistic is tough. Getting them to move realistically is even harder. And getting multiple players to interact with each other and move realistically, that's even harder. And we're really just scratching the surface of what's possible there. But I'll give you an example here of what we're doing already in some of our sports games. You can see these players interacting with each other and kind of tumbling over each other and pushing each other in a very realistic way. The new techniques we're using also make this possible. In the past, the characters used to have these force fields around them, and you get anywhere near them and they kind of bounce off each other. And it's really comical, but again, it takes you out of the experience. It doesn't look that believable. So it's not just about getting characters to move correctly. Everything I've shown you so far is just kind of the biomechanics of motion, just getting their legs and arms to move correctly. If you want to make a believable character, you've got to give them a brain also. They have to have some form of intelligence. And I think this is where the really cool stuff comes in. I'll show you an example here again of the awareness characters used to have in the past and what they have right now. And there's a little kind of cursor that moves around, and this could be a ball, or it could be an opponent, or it could be a clock. It's just something for the character to be aware of. And in the past, the character on the left, if something got around them, they wouldn't really notice it so much. They'd just kind of rotate around like that. But now, we're able to really make the characters interact with that, and it feels like they're not little robotic pawns. They actually are alive and moving. And I can show you also, again, another kind of sneak peek behind the curtain of how we're making this possible. This is the same tool used in a different way. And again, this is all being controlled interactively. Everything I'm showing you is all interactive. It's not cinematics. So this is all happen dynamically while you're playing the game. So we have this character here who needs something to look at. And we're going to give him a point of interest here on the screen, and it's this big green ball. As we move it around, you can see he follows it with his eyes, and then he follows it with his head. And if it went all the way around the side, he'd follow it with his torso. So it's a real natural motion of actually being aware of things that are around them. They can actually perceive it and follow it. It's a real basic principle. But there are more than one thing to be aware of, so let's give him a few objects of interest here. And you can see how he can go from one object to another following it. And actually, we can put some personality into that too. We can have him kind of look from one object in a relaxed way, like that, or have him look very nervously. And it's just some different parameters we use. And it gives them, just that little difference gives them a lot of personality and style, and you kind of can detect what his mood is by doing that. So, that's the awareness of objects, and we can also, of course, do animations, so we can have different kind of attitudes, and, he's not so sure about you. He's not sure if he really likes you. In fact, I'm pretty sure he doesn't. He's pretty angry. But I told him you're a good person, so he's feeling pretty good about it right now. Now, we can actually put these two things together. It's not just about being aware of something. What if the objects he's aware of, he also has an attitude toward them? So he looks at a friend and he says, hey, what's happening? And then another teammate fouls the ball and he goes, oh, that sucks, buddy. And he looks up and he sees a cheerleader and he says, oh, I like her, So this is really powerful. We can associate an emotion with the things that are the points of interest for him, and give him some life and some intelligence in reacting. Now, I'm not saying we've created Brad Pitt here. We're a long way from that, but we're at least putting a brain in these characters, and they're not kind of the static, robotic things that you've seen before. And he can go through a wide variety of animations. And as I mentioned before, it's not just playing those animations, but it's the transitions between those animations. So we actually have an example of this running in game as well. And the clip I'm going to show you here is all recorded in slow motion, so you can kind of see it playing out, because things happen very quickly in a game. And as you know, in a real game of basketball, a player needs to be looking out for their opponents. They need to be watching their teammates. They need to know where the ball is. Maybe their coach needs their attention. They need to look at the clock. There's a lot of things to pay attention to. And you can see in this clip here, this guy in the middle here, he's looking at his opponents here. He's keeping an eye on this guy that's guarding him, looking out for the ball at the same time. He's kind of aware of what's going on. They're looking at each other. They're following the ball. what's really cool is even when the ball's off screen, we know where it is because of where they're looking. And that's really powerful. You can actually have a scenario in a game where you're interacting with another player, and that player you're looking at kind of looks over here, and he tells you that there's somebody approaching. You haven't even seen that person yet because he's not in your field of view, but just by his awareness of this other character, it might be his teammate that's coming up around the side, you can turn and take care of that situation. So this has taken it to a whole new level of, this is the way when you're playing a real game of basketball, you'd probably be interacting with people, and something that we've never been able to do before in games. And we can even take it to another level. This is actually kind of a happy accident. We can have situations where a character is aware of the fact that they're unaware of what's going on. So in this example here, if you follow the guy with the headband here, there's some trick moves happening, and he's not really sure where the ball is, but at least he's looking around in a very believable way and showing us that he's, I don't know what's going on, where's the ball? So it's just kind of a nice side effect of the stuff we've been developing. So, we look back 15 years, and looking forward 15 years, I can see that we could have a new form of entertainment here where you're interacting with characters you really care about. You have empathy for them. You care about what they feel, and the choices you make affect their emotions, and their emotional response to that affects your emotions as you're playing the game. I can see a future where games can be much more than just shooting and fighting and kind of the basic raw instincts that they are today, but you're actually interacting with characters on a level that has never been possible before. Maybe you're actually interacting in games with other characters in a way you actually interact in real life with people. Anything's possible, but if you look back 15 years and you look forward 5, 10, 15 years, some really cool things could happen, and this is really exciting development, and again, part of the reason why I'm so excited to be working in games today. And I just wanted to say thank you to all the organizers, to all the volunteers, to TED for putting this together, and especially want to thank all the really smart and talented people at Electronic Arts that did all this stuff. I didn't do this. I didn't write the code. But I'm fortunate to be here today to share it with you and be able to talk about it. It's all their great work that makes this possible. Thank you.